Welcome to Break Through the Ordinary. You know you desire a more impactful, connected, extraordinary life. That's why we are here to bring you stories from transformational leaders, healers, and entrepreneurs who found themselves trapped in the ordinary and are now living their most extraordinary life because of a breakthrough moment. Together, we will provide world-class tips and tools enabling you to live a life purposely, aligning your heart and soul. Because we believe no one should be imprisoned by their past. We are your hosts, Mark and Claudine Tremonte, a sibling duo who transformed from an ordinary life of disconnection and loneliness to a life of purpose, love, and passion. We use our expertise, our trainings, and experience to inspire others to live an extraordinary life so they can create intimate, thriving relationships that ripple throughout the world. This podcast is only the tip of the iceberg of what is possible. If you want to dive deeper into our systems and break through the endless patterns of settling for crumbs, contact us at thebtopodcast@gmail.com.
Today, on this episode of Breakthrough the Ordinary, we have the wonderful Melanie Curtin, who is a sex and relationship coach with a master's from Stanford, whose work has been featured on Today, Huffington Post Incorporated, Holy Randall Unfiltered, and more. She also is the host of the most popular podcast, Dear Men, How to Rock Sex, Dating, and Relationships. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm curious of what we're going to explore today. That's a tall order that you've taken on and done well with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you could start by sharing with our audience, really, what was your personal breakthrough that had you from, an ordinary life to your extraordinary life?
I love that question. It's such a deep question. I think that if I'm really honest, probably what had me break through from ordinary to extraordinary was suffering. And I think I was pretty unhappy and meandering for a lot of my 20s. And when I sort of discovered personal growth and the law of attraction, which I think is pretty misunderstood, but in my own world, sort of understanding that what I put my conscious awareness and focus and attention on, I get more of, really helped me break through. So for example, I was very, very lonely for a long time, and a lot of my focus was on how lonely I was. And then once I started putting attention and energy into, I would like friends. Please bring me friends, life. I would like to feel a sense of belonging and love. Then I got more of that. And so I think that was a pretty major transition in my life.
Suffering is definitely a wake-up call and a catalyst for sure.
Motivating factor, yes.
Yeah, they say, right? A lot of our growth comes from pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
The breakdowns create breakthroughs, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yes.
So in your words, what do other people need to have a breakthrough in their life to live that extraordinary life?
Ooh, that's also a good question. I would say that similarly, many of my own clients have said something to the same effect of suffering, pain, or I know something in my life needs to change. I can't keep going on this way. A lot of them will say something to that effect. I can't keep going on like this. Something needs to change. And I think that's a good time in life to seek out mentorship of someone that has been through something that you're going through and is now on the other side. I think that's part of why 12-step programs are brilliant in a certain way, especially if you do get a sponsor, because you're relating with someone in an intimate way, not sexually intimate, but in an emotionally intimate way, who has been through the journey that you are on now. So I think that mentorship is a good idea as to a route to get through the swamp, as I call it. And you're slogging through the swamp, it's great to have someone who's on the other side to encourage you as you're mucking through.
Yeah.
Something to look towards, or for, yes.
I think Brene Brown's it's about stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yes, right. It's a great word for it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, since there's that focus for you and your podcast and your own interest, what do you think? It's a two-part question, if you don't mind. Like, what are the elements that make a good relationship, and what have you seen as the patterns that challenge a relationship?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that I think a lot of the elements that make a good relationship are the level of consciousness and awareness that each of the individuals has about their own stuff, their own patterns, how much they've actually worked on themselves and are willing to vulnerably bring that to their partner. So what I see a lot of times is, in our culture, romantic comedies end when the couple gets together. And to me, that's just the beginning of the journey. And we don't have a lot of role models for how hard it is to actually do attachment work in relationship and how much vulnerability it takes to say, my feelings were really hurt yesterday by this thing that happened. A lot of us were not raised in homes where communication was open and valuable in that way. And so most people aren't trained to actually share their heart with their partner. And so instead, they're passive aggressive or they're aggressive aggressive. They think it's their partner's fault. Genuinely, they don't say things like, I was really triggered when this happened and I'm feeling kind of helpless about this. Can you help me, or can we talk about this? Which is kind of an inviting way of bringing someone in. So I think a lot of us kind of lack the training, and the elements of a good relationship are pretty similar to the elements of a good friendship, which is, again, self-awareness, understanding, and the willingness to kind of expose yourself and your insecurities or whatever's going on, and giving the other person a chance to show up. So I know even in friendships, to say like, I was really hurt when you were late and I felt unimportant, or whatever your truth is. Because when you do that, you do give the other person a chance to show up. And not everyone will. Some people will shame you or get angry or try to make it your fault. And then you might want to move away from connection with that person. But some people really will show up. And it's the same in relationships. So I think it's kind of you're offering yourself like this and then seeing if the other person comes towards you. And that kind of builds a solid connection. So I think a lot of the most missing relationship skill is repair. Most people weren't taught how to do repair in their families of origin. And so they can't repair in their romantic relationships. And that's a really big problem, because then resentments build, and that's cracks in the foundation. And eventually that house falls, when I think sometimes it doesn't need to. But repair is related to what I just said, because if you're not self-aware and you can't say, I felt dropped when you were late, I felt dropped. If you're saying like, well, you were late, and so obviously it didn't work, there's not that sense of invitation or a place to come into. And so you need a certain level of baseline awareness and consciousness to be in a conscious relationship. You can't have two unconscious people in a conscious relationship. It doesn't work.
I just love the invitation thing, that it just opens up a space for someone to come in. And a lot of times when we share, it's a cutoff. It's not a invitation. And I'm sorry if I cut you off. But I love that, because it does. There's something about that. It opens me, makes me want to come in, instead of, if you just put it out and cut me, I'm like, there's nowhere to go. There's no invitation. It's like, oh, I'll distance myself even further away from you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I often feel, when I'm in sessions, when people, I don't tend to do couples as much as I do individuals. And they feel like, well, I did share my feelings. Like, and it tends to be more along the lines like, you sucked, you screwed up, or, you were wrong, bad, wrong, blame. And, when we don't personalize or say because I heard every statement you said, I feel hurt when you, and it is that shutdown energetically there. It's just another wall or gaslighting, whatever we want to label it, but there's not a place for an exchange to occur. It's almost a righteous protective place of like, I got the proof now on you. See, you did screw up. And I love that you said that. I think it's also, for myself personally, and what I see is repair. That's not discussed a lot. I think we're just starting to see that, particularly because attachment work has found a place in our dialogue that, though I studied attachment work and, was trained in that over 20 something years ago, it was a specialty if you can find that. And now it's like, oh my God, we're all talking about anxious attachment and, secure attachment and avoidant. And And I'd love to go just a little deeper in repair so that our listeners get that piece, right? Because I love, like, Harriet Lerner, The Art of an Apology, right? Because it's a two-way. Like, I can state where my injury was, or I was hurt when you didn't show up on time, like you said, right? It broke trust. It broke something. And how does the other person respond, right? And I think one of the things I've heard recently is like, I'm so sorry that you felt hurt by that. Is not how we start an apology.
No.
So I don't know if that is something that you work on with your couples also, or, the women that you may counsel in terms of how you help them to accept as well as express the apology.
Yeah, I definitely work with my couples on it because this is the number one skill mostly that we're building. And I primarily work with men and couples. And I would say that the thing I'll counsel them on is when someone's coming to you and they say, I felt dropped or I felt hurt or whatever they're saying, my advice is just hang out there. Just hang out there for a minute. Just hang out in that place for a while. I want you to hang out there. Like, tell me a little more about that. How was that for you? What is that to you? And then sometimes I call it reaching for your version of that. What is your version of that? So not exactly I understand where you're coming from, but I could see how that would be true. I could see how you would feel dropped by that. I've felt dropped when people were late and I felt like I'm here and now we're going to miss the show or the beginning of the show. And I'm annoyed and I don't want to be annoyed with you because we're supposed to be having a fun night out. And so I felt like I couldn't say anything. And then it was just annoyed for the first half. And reach for your version of whatever it is that's being expressed. Sometimes that helps people with empathy because it's actually putting you in a similar state instead of defending against what the person is saying, which is sort of what most of us were modeled in our homes. So that's often a place I will start in terms of repair with my couples. I will also send my couples the emotion wheel. So I think you two are probably familiar. For listeners that maybe aren't, there's a beautiful emotion wheel with all the different emotions around. And some of the wheels will have a sort of section, right? Like disappointment, sort of all the different words related to disappointment, all the different words related to joy. And so you can see all of them visually because a lot of my couples, and this is not just true of men, I think it's more true of men, are not as emotionally sophisticated. They're not as emotionally literate as they need to be in a conscious partnership. Again, because it wasn't role modeled to them. In a lot of people's homes, things were just swept under the rug. So literally no emotional dialogue happened or limited emotional dialogue. So in order to get better at this, we have to learn how to do that. So I'll send my couples emotion wheels, and they've said that that's been helpful. Because they're all pent up. They're trying to do it right. They want to do it right, but they don't have the words for it. And I don't know in your work with couples, but what I've seen repeatedly is they can't generate the words, but they can identify them. They can look on the chart or on the thing and circle them and say, this I felt, dropped, let's say, or whatever it was. They didn't have that word before. So yeah. So for the person to truly be vulnerable, like I will stop my couples frequently and say, okay, let's try that again. I want you to express how you were feeling. He never listens to me. He's never listening to me. Okay, let's try that again. So I will call timeout. I will pause and have the person try again. Like, I didn't feel heard. Okay, stop. That's it. That's your part. I didn't feel heard when this happened. Like, pause. Now pause. And then the other person just hang out there for a second. Okay, that's frustrating. If I didn't feel heard, I would feel frustrated. Great. Pause. Just take a breath, just hang out here for a second. Because I think a lot of us are trying to jump to the next thing right away. And a lot of times we just need a little time to actually integrate. Your partner didn't feel heard. And you're one of the most important people in their life. So let's just honor that for a minute.
Wow. In that pause, you're creating a presence and a listening that doesn't happen, because that reaction is not listening. It's just defense. It's coming from whatever ego wants to protect. But that pause, I like that pause, because all of a sudden I have to be present. I have to breathe. I have to be here. There's nowhere to go. Really great. And I love the emotional wheel, because we were talking a lot and watched Atlas at a Harp, and A. Brown is really bringing that to the forefront, that research shows people are usually angry, happy, sad, and that's it. Like, that's their range. So when you bring all the other, it's just easier to find out, oh, wait, this is what I'm really feeling. And I've put it under anger, or, this is when I'm sad. But wait, there's all these other things going on. So it's a beautiful way.
Yeah. And it's just as important to be facile, to be skillful with the positive emotions too. And that's something that I work with my couples on as well is, I felt let in when you told me that. I felt closer to you when this happened. I felt loved when this happened. So I'll do prompts with my couples. I felt loved when, and each person goes. And inevitably there's a moment that one of or both of them is surprised, like, oh, you felt loved when I did that? I didn't know that. Right. It's important that we are communicating. I think there's a big focus on communicating when things aren't working, which makes sense because those moments of repair are so critical. They can break the relationship. But we want to be skillful with the positives too, because that's what helps build our connection and what strengthens our connection. If I know that you feel loved, I felt loved when you brought the dark chocolate back. You thought of me. I felt really loved. Well, how much more likely is it that they're going to do that again? Really likely. So it's important that we're giving each other the messages about what's working. And again, I think that's not done in a lot of families of origin. So that's a new skill that we're building, and one that I'm kind of role modeling in sessions with couples and encouraging them to maintain. And something new I've been playing with, I'm curious if either of you does this with your clients, is a sort of monthly relationship dinner or relationship meal with a certain little structure so that couples are kind of maintaining that kind of communication so that it doesn't build up. And again, not just to focus on what's not working, but also times that I felt loved this past month, that I felt like deep connection, because they can often just, if you're not mindful of them, they can just fall by the wayside and you forget.
Yeah, the State of the Union weekly. We'll talk about it weekly.
I think it's a frequency that works for the couple, but I agree with you. There's a consistency about having a check-in. I think, the Gottmans are really great about that too, right? It's however that looks, but it's a place to come together, right? What's working, what's not working. Start with appreciation.
In our professional lives, we have performance reviews, we have team meetings, it's so odd to me how we've kind of sequestered this personal relationship thing over here. And that's just supposed to run perfectly without any real structures. People know you have to put work. They're like, yeah, you got to work on your relationship, but we don't have intelligent research-backed structures for many of us in our relationships to help with that. Whereas in our work life, it's like, why would you ever, of course you're going to talk to your team about what's going on. And well, this is pretty similar. Or scheduled sex. People feel really weird about scheduled sex. I'm like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. People schedule team building events. This is a team building event for your relationship.
I never looked at it that way. That's a great one.
Yeah. Which usually works if you're building the love bank of positive, stuff and really working the relationship. I mean, that helps it out. That's the foreplay, beforehand. I like the idea. We talked about it too, about that meeting or having a set up time, because sometimes you don't express something that happened during the week and you're holding it. And if you create the safe, and it really has to be a safe space where you can actually express what really happened, because a lot of times, we're all in growth, and I still have many places where I don't get it right out. It doesn't come right out. Sometimes I'm just holding it or I'm sitting. But if I know, there's a meeting, it's safe, I can just say whatever's happening. That's a great place.
And sometimes it's tiny, right? I remember a couple did a meeting like that. And one of the things was, I don't understand why you keep putting the toaster oven under the counter. I keep taking it out and you keep putting it away. And they had this moment about I really enjoy like clean counter space. It makes me feel relaxed and spacious. And the other person was like, I could see that. I didn't know that. I could see that. It makes me feel better about it because I just kept thinking, I toast my toast. Like, why do you keep taking away my toaster oven? But there was a real reason, and they both could kind of meet in the middle on it. But that was a great example of it wasn't big enough for him to say something, but then during the meeting, he was like, this kind of bothers me.
I got that years ago, you know what, on the toilet paper, whether it comes under or over. It's like, no, I want the toilet paper to come over. And now I do it all the time, and it bothers me if somebody else doesn't do it, but it was the toilet paper. It's like, no, it has to come over the top.
I am bi when it comes to my toilet paper.
Me too. I don't have a preference, but that's a good example of someone might feel loved, like, oh, you remembered. Yes. I noticed you remembered this week, and I felt really respected. Respected is an interesting word that comes up in my sessions too. Not just loved, but respected. Like, you heard me, and you care about my preferences. You care about what I said. That has me feel respected. And so those little things kind of matter. And I think that's the whole connection between all of these, right? Is if you're not present in your life, you're going to miss those moments. So there's a certain level of consciousness you need in order to be present in your life. If you're really struggling or really anxious or just not really present in your life, even if you have good intentions, you're probably going to miss your partner's preferences because you're not really that present.
So I love this conversation, repair. But so I want to ask you before this, because we all agree there has to be some kind of willingness. But before we even get to this, how do you get triggered couples to even get to that place? Because what we're saying is wonderful. You have to be pretty conscious to be on this level of communication. And even when we're aware, it still takes work. How do you get them even there when you're there and all they are is triggered, all they are is attacking, and they're not even in a space, they're not even in the presence? How do you bring them into that even? I'm curious about.
That's a great question. I'll be honest. I don't think I've worked with a lot of couples in a state of distress, in that kind of state of distress. So a lot of the couples I'm working with are more, they're either they've been married and they want to improve their relationship. They're kind of aware, okay, we need to be more skillful with this. Let's bring someone in that's smarter than us and knows things. Or, hey, we're getting married soon. Or, I've had couples become engaged while we're working together. We know we need to do some attachment stuff. We know we need to know some things. So I'm working more with couples that are aware we have a great relationship. We want it to be an extraordinary relationship, kind of the theme of your podcast, ordinary to extraordinary, versus we are in serious distress. So I guess I'm not sure yet. And I have had couples that I'm working with that are in distress in a moment. Wedding planning comes to mind. That is really stressful. I've never worked with a couple where that wasn't stressful. That is a stressful time. And it's a tender time because you just got engaged. So I have couples that are in, having things going on, but they didn't come to me necessarily in a state of, we're at the end of our rope. I have worked with a lot of men who are in the process of, essentially divorcing. They're not quite sure yet, but they have some hints. I've worked with a lot of men who are transitioning out of a relationship. And the truth is that if you're with a partner who doesn't want to grow, it doesn't matter how much you do or how much you want to grow. You have to have two people playing on the same team. So I've worked with a lot of people who are in the process of evaluating, is this possible for us to have a healthy partnership? And that's a hard discussion. And I think that's an important one because you can't do everything. You can do what you can do, and then you see who you're playing with. And sometimes that can be heartbreaking, especially if you're co-parenting, to actually face the reality that this is going to be a good teammate for co-parenting, but this is not a conscious, healthy partnership teammate. It's never going to happen.
I think there's a great place of also the preparatory work of, not that we know, like, right, when having a kid, what you can expect in your first year, but right, milestones in relationships, when they first move in together, the first year of marriage, that merging on so many levels, energetically, spatially, financially, spiritually, like you're in each other's space and stuff. And can they make that choice now to do some of that work right? The groundwork, the however we want to say, start up setting your vision of a relationship, your principles that that you live by, that they live by, so that they have the toolbox if needed.
Yeah. And the mentors to come back to, right? The mentors of folks that have their best interest as a couple at heart. I truly believe it takes a team. It takes a team to raise a couple. and it's important to have some of those trusted folks already at your back before things happen. As one of the intentions of my course for couples is have someone you like and trust that you've worked with already to learn some things, so that down the road there's not that hurdle of, oh, well, who are we going to, because I think a lot of couples are like, well, we kind of need to see someone, but who are we going to see? If you found them, I don't trust them. It's like, what if you already had someone that you liked and trusted, and not just that person, but for example, I can recommend other people too for the couple to work with around specific things. So kind of a gateway person. I think having that already set up, to your point, Claudine, is intelligent. That's a smart couple decision. Instead of waiting, like, let's wait until the leg is broken. No, let's wait. Let's meet the doctor first. So that we know who they are and where their office is and what their hours are, and just all of that logistical stuff to smooth the way. Because I think we really used to live in tribes where couples were witnessed by elders and other couples and their families. And there were just so many more people holding that couple in their heart and on a practical level, witnessing what was happening. We've lost that in our culture. We are very isolated, and couples are isolated. People are isolated and couples are isolated. And we need to get more into that. That's something I'm passionate about, either starting or facilitating somehow, is couples groups, so that couples can be talking about couplehood with each other in a mindful way. Because I think it's also healing to hear, oh, you guys have that issue too. Yeah, right. I put the blender away the other day and she was upset about it and I couldn't figure it out. But yeah, toaster oven, I hear that sort of normalizes the things we're all going through that a lot of us aren't talking about. Like, who's sharing about their toaster oven with their friends? It's not a normal conversation, or just things about conscious couplehood. I think are important. I would want to be in that group. I would want some kind of space like that too, but I'm not sure exactly how that will be organized. Always open if you know of anything.
We're actually doing that, and then expanding on that, bringing so people can learn with each other even before they're in relationship. Because you work with a coach by yourself, and then they tell you go out in the dating world. And I'm not saying anything's bad about this, but you're going out there testing, trying all the time. Well, what if you're doing it in a group and you're learning already how to communicate, how those little things like the toaster, and oh my God, how do you react? How do you open that invitation so that when you even get to relationship, and it's already there. It's not something, because it's harder, when life has its own pressures, your job, whatever, if you have kids, and then you're going to add, oh my God, now I got to do the work now. I have to learn brand new now.
Yeah.
If I have the knowledge beforehand, I'm already going in with it. So I've already practiced. I've already seen what people's reactions are. Oh, I know how to deal with it and stuff like that.
And I know my own, though. I mean, right? Like, I know where I shut down or don't respond, or I get defensive. And if I can look at that trigger in a safe group setting, it's a great mirror.
One of our men recently, because I work with men, primarily men and couples, and one of our men, we talk about boundaries. He set a boundary with one of his roommates for the first time, and it went well. And he was like, wow, this is a lot easier. Doing life with boundaries is a lot easier. This thing would have bothered me for years if I hadn't addressed it. And it was a new skill. And that's something that we do talk about, is a lot of these relationship skills you can build in friendships or with work colleagues or people in your life, things like boundaries and how you act when your boundary is crossed. To your point, Claudine, what are the signs in your body? Usually for most of my clients, it's like tension in my stomach. Like I just feel that feeling. Okay, that's a sign. That's a sign. So as you're moving through life now, when you have that feeling, go look for the boundary and figure that out. But you can practice a lot of these skills, to your point, in a safe group or with with, people in your life, and then having safe people to process that with is building a healthy relationship in the future. It's the same thing. You don't need to have the partner in your life already to be building towards a healthy relationship, which is, I think, exciting, because I think a lot of people do think like, oh, I have to wait until I'm relating with that person. But
You don't
really,
want to learn everything there.
No. You want to get in the gym way before you need to hit the race. No, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, we've done it as siblings a little, so that we have some of that groundwork. Yeah, that's good.
I often say to people, it's, you had said about having the team already identified, right? And if I'm working with an individual, it's the same piece of like, we don't wait. It's called preventative care. Like, right? You don't wait until you need an infection or you have to have your annual physical. You pick out a primary care physician, or you have a dentist. You don't just do your teeth right before you see the dentist. You're doing it every day, even though you don't see the results. You have a result that ultimately you have. And that idea of building the muscle and how to, have people be in the process versus the outcome, right? That arc, that of the impatience. What is that about you, right? Because everything we've talked about can erode, right? The unexpressed, or how it's expressed, or I held on to that blender thing. Right? All of those have these eroding qualities. So, right, preventatively, what do we want to do with that? And I kind of speak into it in that way for some people, because there's people who really look at coaching and therapy. Maybe go, I don't want someone in my business. I don't want this. Like, really, you got someone in your mouth. Like, what are you, really? We're going to gynecologist. What are we talking about here? And, so having a way of normalizing being a part of it. And I think you're right. The tribe, you were exposed, you were seen, you were witnessed, and there were people in your business. There were roles in the tribe that was their business. You sat with them when they saw conflict, or they saw it was time for you to have kids. They called you in, and right, like, and that's not there anymore. Now we've become, like you said, this.
And we've lost a lot of that wisdom, because that, bringing, family constellations, for example, I guess it's not called therapy, but family constellations, that originated with the Zulu in Africa. It originated there. It was brought to the West by Bert Hellinger, but it originated with the Zulu for a lot of these reasons, because when someone's having an issue in the tribe, it's affecting everyone. So it's like, let's bring that in. Let's all work with it together to help you and to help us, because we understand inherently we are all interconnected. We don't exist in these separate spheres. That's an illusion. And I'm from Oahu, and in Native Hawaiian culture, I am not Native Hawaiian myself, but Ho'oponopono was another group process of processing in a group what's happening for some individuals having conflict in the group. Because we understand when we hold it all together and witness you, and we're with both of you, and there's a structure for how we do this, it tends to work better. And there's wisdom that's being passed on and modeled. Whereas in our culture, everyone's kind of trying to figure it out themselves and just basically repeating what their families of origin did, which in my experience, I would say probably less than 10% of families are healthy, meaning emotionally healthy, safe, nurturing, understand how to do repair. It's not very
common
many people.
No.
It's pretty rare.
We've become so separated. I mean, the physical and emotional and intimacy approximation with tribes compared to how we live, because it's still the same. We're all affecting each other, but we're just so disconnected from that structure and that. Hopefully we're bringing it back. This work we're all doing is bringing it back to.
It feels like that. It feels like there's a groundswell. It feels like there's a shift. I think people are more open than ever. It does feel like it's shifting. A lot of things are shifting at the same time, and I find that pretty exciting.
Agree.
Yeah, a lot of us talk about being in community. Everybody I talk with wants to create communities together, so it's wonderful.
I'm aware, where we are in the podcast, but I do want to ask a question as we come, into the latter part of this. Is conscious sex? And I, the word sex means a lot to different people, but it is the act of coming together physically, spiritually, sexually. So can you speak into that? You have that?
Yeah, you're sort of like, what is conscious sex?
How do you have it, for you and for your couples and your program?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think that conscious sex, again, there's a foundation element of, are you able to be present in your body? And that question is not a given. So sort of to the same point, you can't have conscious sex with two unconscious people. You can't really do that. You can't really do that. No, like a lot of, I was talking to, my man about this recently, about how it feels a little bit like really good conscious sex is kind of like improvisational music that you're making together. So you're listening to the moment and to each instrument, and you're kind of you're going over here and then you're going over there. And in order to do that, you have to actually be present in your body. If you're, for example, if you have unresolved trauma, so part of my background is working with survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault. If you have unresolved trauma in your body and there are certain parts of you that are clenched or tight or braced that you're not even aware of, it's going to be really hard to have that kind of conscious, fluid sex in the moment with the whatever's happening, because there are places that are defending, that are defensive or defending. So there's actually a lot of prep work that goes in to conscious sex, in my opinion, that each person has to do. And for a lot of the men I work with, some of that trauma is around sexual shame. So many men, boys or young men, were shamed in some way around their sexuality. Mark, I don't know if you've had experiences like that, but that's very common in my experience in men and boys. And similarly, unwanted sexual touch. I would say at least 25 to 30% of my male clients had an experience or experiences of unwanted sexual touch, in a range of what that means. But if there's unresolved stuff that hasn't been dealt with, sometimes, for example, a young man or a man might turn to porn as a way to numb or not, that didn't really happen. I don't want to look at that. I'm putting this over in this box over here, but it's still in the room around sex. It's still in the room. And so if that man isn't really present in his body, she's going to feel that, and she's not going to feel as open, because really the feminine is kind of like a flower that opens with consciousness. Consciousness opens her. Deep presence opens her. And so if he's kind of checked out and not really there, she's not going to be able to open as much. So I think there's a lot of foundational work that needs to happen before that moment of conscious sex. And I think that if you have that actual, which takes a while to get there, right? Each person actually doing their work is a big investment. And then once you're there, it's really about reading the moment. What is this moment calling for? Because sometimes it's like extended cuddling. I just need a lot of touch today. I just need a lot of comforting touch. That's what is needed. And maybe we're not even going to get to penetration, but depending on what's going on in each of your lives, is one of you grieving something? Is one of you celebrating something? Whatever is actually happening in life in the moment is there. It's in the room. So let's be with that. Let's play with that. Let's go from there, rather than it has to look like this. And that's, I think, a big deal around conscious sex, in my opinion, is getting out of the porn script. So a lot of the couples I work with, a lot of the people I work with have this concept of like, this is how we do sex, right? Like, I go down on you, you go down on me, penetration, or I finger you, penetration. It's very porn script-y, and that's quite limiting for a lot of people. It's not actually what feels good. It's not actually what's the highest expression of the moment. It's just what we've been trained to do. And, right now, about a third of porn watchers are women. So it's not only men that are watching porn. A lot of us are watching porn, and the numbers are pretty astronomical. So that idea of this is how sex is and this is how sex ends, for example, is limiting. And it takes a lot of work for all of us to deconstruct that, myself included. I'm not exempt. I keep thinking of like, well, this has to happen and that has to happen. And it has to end with him coming. Otherwise, I failed as a woman. Like, he didn't if he didn't come, I failed, or we're not doing it right or something. It takes a lot of work to kind of be like, sometimes we can just make out and get turned on, and that's okay. That's conscious sex. It doesn't have to end with the money shot. And I think that's something that I keep having to teach clients and reteach clients is there's this script and we're still all following it. And it's not always in our highest and best. And we need to keep coming back to like, that's not always how it has to go. What else is possible? What kind of music can we make that feels good and brings us closer? Because I think that's really the point. Does it feel good? Does it bring you closer? Okay, you're doing it right. It's like, that's it. I think some men, for example, I've talked to men who've said, yeah, I've refused sex from my partner because I just didn't think I could get it up that night. I was tired. I didn't want to not be able to perform. And in my world, it's like, there's a lot you can do without getting hard. You don't have to, that doesn't have to be part of it. But in their world, it was like, well, if I can't get hard and finish, then she'll think that I'm not doing it right, or I will have somehow failed. And so I won't do anything at all. And I'm like, that's sad. I would feel sad if I were your partner. I'd feel really sad that we couldn't do closeness tonight because of that. I don't need you to get hard every time. I don't need you to stay hard the whole time. And I can tell you as a sex researcher looking at the data, that's not important to women who have sex with men, that they get really hard right away, that they stay really hard the whole time. That's not important. It's fun. It's great. It's a lovely part of sex, but it's not a prerequisite. It's not even what we want or need all the time. But again, that script, we think this is how it has to go. This is how it has to go. This is how it has to go. And so sometimes we'll even preempt sex at all because we're like, well, I don't think I can get there tonight, so I don't want to do anything. It's like, that 0 to 60, what if we just went 35? Like, what if we just made out for a while and did things that feel good? That's it. Does it feel good? Does it bring you closer? Oh, definitely. I love talking about this.
Thank you. Yeah.
Same here.
Because there's an invitation here, and this whole conversation's been many invitations, ourselves and to whoever that is, our friend, our community, our tribe, our beloved, hopefully to ourselves, right? That how we communicate, how we have our needs met, how we get to be seen, heard, appreciated, and explored is such a sacred act. And, as you spoke, there's so many, like you've used concepts that I'd love to dive deeper in another podcast, right? Because I'm hearing that de-armoring consciously. How are we coming back to presence? How are we coming back to our own, embodiment of ourselves? And I think that is also the groundwork of a great relationship. It starts here, though.
Absolutely.
As we do wrap this episode up and hopefully be a future one, is there some golden nuggets you'd like our audience to walk away with that say, oh, yeah, thank you. God, I'm glad they had her on today. You've already dropped lots of nuggets.
Yeah, well, I already loved it.
But if there's parting words?
What's interesting is what's coming to me in this moment is give yourself some credit. Meaning an audience member, give yourself some credit for how far you've already come and the steps you're already taking. One of the ways we start our calls for our program is celebrations. What's one thing that worked this week, that you did well this week? Because I think that for many of us, self-esteem is sort of the underpinning of everything, and giving yourself some credit, I think is a more accessible way of saying self-love. Give yourself some credit for listening to this, for taking some steps to actually grow yourself. Give yourself some credit. Give yourself some love. That feels really good, and it's uplifting. And when you feel good about how far you've come, you tend to show up better for others. But just, give yourself some credit because you've shown up here, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Second that. Love that.
Yep.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you
thanks
for
for having
all that
me.
you brought to us today. This is an extraordinary opportunity. It's beautiful to meet you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Yes.
Love to meet you. Yeah, it was wonderful to meet you too. Heard you enough, and it's wonderful. Thank you for listening to this episode. Our intention is that you take these tools to break through any limitation holding you back from living your extraordinary life. If you would like to learn more about our group and individual coaching, contact us at thebtopodcast@gmail.com. Please support us and the podcast by following us and leaving a rating or review. To catch all the latest, follow us at the BTO Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.